Hi, I'm Tom Stevenson, and welcome to Tools, Techniques, and Metal Models for Success series. In this series, we're going to be looking at a number of different areas and topics that'll help make you more successful in managing projects, managing your business, and managing your life in many respects. You'll see how this sort of forms a network or lattice work of tools and techniques that you can use at will to assist you in those endeavors. So the first topic that we're going to talk about in this series is called VUCA. And you've probably heard about it in the news lately, what with the COVID-19 crisis. It's come up a number of times because it's a very applicable model that helps you identify and see things more clearly. In our example with VUCA, we're going to be talking about how it affects the construction industry, but you can apply this to many industries, not just the construction industry, as you'll see. It was originally developed by Navy SEALs and the US military because their operations and special forces endeavors really are volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. Over time, though, a lot of it was felt to make a lot of sense in areas such as business and project management because, to be honest, that's the way business is. That's the way projects go. They don't go the way that we plan. There's always uncertainty. There's always complexity. And so having an understanding of how these things come and interact and affect your plans is very helpful because it makes you a little bit more relaxed when these things occur during your projects or during whatever you're trying to execute on. So we'll start off with volatility. In construction, we have a lot of volatility in the construction industry. It's a very fast-changing world. There's a lot of new materials, systems, methodologies. There's what we call BIM, building information modeling. There's a lot of things that are going on, and our buildings have become more and more complex over time. And with all those changes that are taking place, there's a certain amount of volatility. We also depend on external forces. We have materials that we import. Many of them are commodities. They're sort of based on what the rates of inflation are. If there's a trade war, that can escalate pricing. You can imagine if you price a project that's 3 or 4 or 5 years long, as many of our big infrastructure projects are, it's very difficult to get a handle on commodity pricing and how that may be impacted. We may be able to transfer some risk through how we devise our contracts, but at the end of the day, there is a lot of volatility because there's things that we're not sure about that change very rapidly. It could be based on some political process, adversaries trying to gain political strength by having a trade war, how better position themselves, and that puts you very vulnerable if you've quoted prices in a certain way. We also have a lot of volatility in our projects too. Just the COVID-19. Do you think that most construction projects thought of that going into that? That you can be sure that they didn't. Most governments obviously didn't think about it. We can debate the issues as to whether this is what we would call an unknown or a black swan event, or whether it was really unknown known, something that we knew about and that we should have better planned for, which is really how it's being classified. But to the average construction company, definitely would have been considered an unknown of the impacts that would have on their business and their ability to do work. So we have a lot of volatility and uncertainty, things that we don't know. So they kind of tie together and they cross over there. Volatility is kind of like, boom, it blows up on you and you're very quickly. Uncertainty would be we don't know what it's going to be like going forward. We're not certain how fast things will get back on track if we're talking about COVID-19 again and how it affects the industry. Well, that would provide a certain amount of uncertainty. Can we have people working in more close proximity to each other? Is there some more information and research that's going to come out that shows that working in closed environments causes problems? Are we going to have a cure soon, a vaccine soon, sooner rather than later? These are all uncertainties. And so in every business, we deal with a number of uncertainty. In construction, too, you can think about renovation work, restoration work, things that are behind walls, things that are in the ground, we can make certain educated guesses about, and we can do certain investigative work to try to minimize the uncertainty. And that's good to know and understand, because if we have an understanding of what are some of the potential things that can go wrong in this environment, it helps us take better action to prepare and to plan and to have contingencies in place. So it's a valuable tool, that part of VUCA, to identify and then try to come to grips with and really investigate depending on the probability and the impact. Is this a low probability, high impact event? COVID-19, low probability, but very high impact event? Or is this a low probability, low impact event? Well, if it's a low probability and low impact event, we're probably not going to spend that much time investigating and worrying about it. We'll probably deal with it if it comes up. But it's still good to have a handle on what are the uncertainties that are potential in our projects. And as we'll talk about in another one of our series, unknown unknowns, there's certain ones we'll never know until they actually appear. That's the whole idea of an unknown unknown. But definitely with uncertainties, one of our goals in project management and business management is to identify, categorize, and have contingencies and minimize some of the risk where it's possible. So complexity, complex, volatile, uncertain, complex. Well, in construction, our projects are not less complicated than they were 30 years ago. They're more complicated. We have more advanced building systems. Our systems all interact and communicate with each other. The level of complexity of our building envelopes is much more complex, in the sense that we have much tighter sealed buildings, which require fresh air inside the buildings, which can cause a host of building science related issues if we're not careful. So the level of complexity is there compared to the way it was. It's much higher levels. And some projects by their nature are more complex. If you think about a subway system or a light rail transit system, fairly complex, because you're digging, you're tunneling, you're excavating. There's a lot of unknowns when you're in the ground, and there's a lot of complexity and a lot of safety requirements that are involved. Or if you're building a hospital, a lot more complexity than, say, if you're building a condominium building, which would have less complexity because there'd be a lot more repetition involved in it, and houses, which would have even less complexity. But still, there's a certain level of complexity. And also you have to consider the complexity and the expertise you have managing the complexity. You're building a house, very often, if you're the builder, if it's a small builder building custom homes, you're sort of managing that whole entity. And so for you, there is a lot of complexity because there's a lot of things that you have to manage. On a larger project, you have various experts in their fields, and it's more a coordination process of that expertise. But still, the level of complexity tends to be at a higher scale. So complexity has a number of different areas that it fits into. You can think of the Space Shuttle or SpaceX, higher levels of complexity. There's when you do something, there's the first order. First order is what happens when you do that particular thing. And that tends to be very evident to people when they see it and they do it. What's not so evident is the second order or the third order. We build this building and we build this envelope, we build it super tight. The second order and the third order is that, well, if we didn't make it tight that it would last long term and moisture starts leaking in, or if we have moisture building up in the wall systems and mold occurs, and then we have people getting sick in the building, those are like second and third order consequences, which would be based on either the design or the execution of the design. First order, when we think about simple things like eating, you really like that donut because it tastes so good. So first order is, you eat the donut, it tastes so good. Second order is, well, you eat the donut every day. After about 6 months or a year, you put on 10 pounds, 15 pounds. That's adding weight to you. Third order is, well, you keep eating the donuts year after year, you keep gaining weight. And then you have heart disease, diabetes, and a bunch of other conditions that build up over time. So if you think about things in simple terms, first order tends to be very attractive. You eat the donut, tastes great. Second order, you keep eating the donuts, you start gaining weight slowly. That's not so good. Third order, you have these long-term chronic diseases, right? In buildings, first order, we build it really fast and we get it done and we make a quick profit, maybe. But then maybe we have a whole pile of warranty issues and lawsuits later on and different things going on because of second order and third order. So there is always those things to consider. And keep in mind with that first order tends to be a very attractive item for people. And so you got to sort of catch yourself. Well, doing this shortcut probably really is not a shortcut. It's actually, we're playing the short game, not the long game. And in areas of business and project management, particularly in construction, should be a big consideration for the long game. We'll talk about those in other segments as well. Ambiguity. I always have trouble pronouncing ambiguity. Ambiguous. So these are things that aren't often 100% clear. And some things are clearer than others. So, sometimes it can be on operational issues. So an example might be, is it better for us to have the material on site early to ensure that it's there when needed? Or is it better to get it there more close to when the work is being done? The problem is if we get it very close, like a just in time, will it be there when we need it? And we really have to evaluate this on many levels to make sure that we're making the correct choice. Generally speaking, from a just in time and from a lean construction point of view, the closer we can have it to the time it's being used, the better. We're not paying for it ahead of time. It's not going to be damaged. We don't have to move it multiple times. That would tend to be the best answer in most cases. But if all of a sudden it's a particular item and we don't have it and everybody's standing around, or it's on the critical path and we didn't get it on site soon enough, or we didn't factor in that it would get stuck at the border coming up from the US for 3 months, and that's delaying our project, could be a chiller unit or something like that, that would be a problem. So we have to really evaluate these things very carefully. And what I've learned about lean construction, we'll talk about that in a number of our other episodes in the series, is that the most responsible time is really the answer. And most responsible time is getting as close as we possibly can with the responsibility that it'll actually be there when we need it, so that we're not moving it multiple times, we're not paying for it long ahead of time, it's not becoming damaged, it's not being stolen, and it is there when we need it. So again, we've got to do some calculations and thoughts with that. So things aren't always clear to us when we first look at it. So that's kind of a transparency and ambiguous ambiguity. You can think of it in those terms. And we want to make things as transparent as possible. The other thing is, another example I've got is the radiant floor heating system better than the one we used on the last project? So we've got to ask ourselves, because we might think because we used that one on the last project, we should use it again on this project. And is that true? So it's a question, right? And the answer's not always clear to us. And sometimes it takes some investigative work. And sometimes when you do the investigative work, you still might miss on some things, but at least you've given it some thought and having some understanding that things aren't always the way we perceive them to be. They're not always as transparent. We have to look at it from different viewpoints, get other expertise, ask them their opinions, think if they have any bias, do we have any bias, and then make our decisions from there. All right, so it's not always clear. So think about it from that perspective. So, VUCA means a lot for us. It gives us an awareness of what's going on in our surroundings. And I think often in projects, and you'll see this come up over and over again in the series, we don't take the time to really think things through. We just do. And unfortunately, sometimes that means we redo, and we redo unnecessarily. In project management, we do a lot of planning, and planning is important. But really, as Eisenhower said, plans are nothing, planning is everything. And we do understand that whatever we originally planned, we will have to adjust. We will have to pivot. We have to be, that's part of the term agile. We have to be agile at responding, have flexibility in reacting to events, and be resilient through this process. And those of us that really are agile and resilient through this process, I'm telling you, you're going to have a fantastic career in this business, because not everybody handles it the same way. And it's just having that understanding of what's going on in your surroundings, having a time to reflect and think about things can be very, very helpful towards your success. So like I said, change is inevitable, but plans are nothing. Planning is everything. We're going to keep on that track too, the flexibility of being able to pivot as we go along. And a lot of these tools and techniques that we're going to be talking about, they don't work in every situation, but there's certain situations that they do work in, and you'll be able to pick from them and choose from them. Mind you, VUCA is something that's kind of global, so every kind of project will have these 4 key areas to deal with, and that's why I kind of started the series with VUCA, because I thought it was kind of an all-encompassing model that we can think about. And to what extent your project might be volatile, it might not be so, but one of those 4 is probably going to really stick out to you at certain moments in time in your project. And before you get into your project, it's good to sort of have a handle of, you know, where do we stand with VUCA on this particular project? What things can we better ourselves on? It's a good starting point to enact a number of other tools, techniques, and mental models that we are going to be discussing in this series. So you keep in mind how this will fit in with our overall goals of time. When do we need to have this project completed by? What's our budget for the project? What's the quality expectations of ourselves and our clients? What are our moral and ethical obligations towards the safety of the people working on our projects? And are we accomplishing what we're supposed to accomplish in this particular project? So I'm going to leave it at that for today, and I want you to ponder VUCA, next event, next project, or just events that you see occurring in your business, in your life, and see how it works for you. I think you'll find it's an excellent tool. Have a great day. My name's Tom Stevenson, and please subscribe to my YouTube channel. I think it's somewhere below on your screen, and look forward to talking to you again in the future. And please leave a comment if you enjoyed this podcast. All the best.